Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Recaps and Reacts with me, Sarah. So I'm sure you can tell by the title of this video what this video will be about. My last video, my introduction video, I mentioned I wanted to kickstart off this channel with one of my all-time favorite shows of all time, and that show is Ugly Betty. Yay! So this is a show I literally will watch maybe once every 1 to 2 years. I just will rewatch the whole entire series because it just makes me so happy. I just love all of the characters' chemistry and just the love that they have for one another. You can just see it throughout the series. So that's what I will be talking about today. Ugly Betty, which is inspired by the Colombian telenovela Yo Soy Betty La Fea by Fernando Gaitan and was developed by Sylvia Orta. Also, Salma Hayek was a producer on this show. So how I will be doing this whole entire series, I'm going to break it up. It ran for 4 seasons, so I'm going to break up each video season by season. So today I will be talking about season 1, and next week will be about season 2, and so forth. And I just want to tell you right here, there will be a little bit of spoilers, so I'm not going to give everything away. I'm just going to talk about the characters and some of the main plot lines throughout the show. So if you want to watch the show, this is the time to stop right now. Stop, because I am going to be mentioning some things that will be some spoilers. So I kind of want to get into some of the characters, and then also I'm going to talk about some guest stars that were out throughout the whole entire first season. So here we go. Let's get started. And also, please excuse the noise outside. It is extremely windy today, so you can hear the wind coming through. And also, I am doing laundry, so if you hear some buzzards going off, that's what that is. So let's get started. Okay, so here are the characters. So we have Betty Suarez, which is our main character, played by America Ferrera. Then we have Daniel Meade, who was editor-in-chief of Mode, and also Betty's boss, played by Eric Mabius. Then we have Wilhelmina Slater, the creative director of Mode magazine, and that is played by Vanessa Williams. Then we have Mark St. James, who is Wilhelmina Slater's assistant, played by Michael Urie. We have Amanda Tannen, who is the receptionist for Mode magazine, and also is a love interest for Daniel Meade as well, and she is played by Becky Newton. We have Ignacio Suarez, Betty's father. Also, she calls him Papi most of the time, so Ignacio or Papi you'll hear throughout the show, and that's played by Tony Plena. Then we have Hilda Suarez, played by Ana Ortiz. Hilda Suarez is Betty's older sister. And then we have Justin Suarez, who is Betty's nephew and also Hilda's son, and he is played by Mark Indelicato. Then we have Christina McKinney, who is the seamstress for Mode magazine and also becomes one of Betty's good friends. She is played by Ashley Jensen. And then we have Bradford Meade, who is Daniel Meade's father and also owns Meade Publications and Mode magazine, and he is played by Alan Dale. Then we have Claire Meade, played by Judith Light. Claire Meade is Bradford Meade's wife and also the mother of Daniel Meade. Then we have Alexis Meade, which is Daniel's sister or brother. We will get into that later on. And also the son or daughter of Bradford Meade and Claire Meade. She is played by Rebecca Romaine. Then we have Walter, who is Betty's boyfriend, played by Kevin Sussman. We have Henry Grubstick, who is one of Betty's crushes or love interests, played by Christopher Gorham. Also, he is a accountant for Mode magazine as well. So Betty and him work together, which is ultimately how they meet. And then we have Santos, which is Hilda's ex and also Justin's father, played by Kevin Alejandro. So I want to get into some of the notable guest stars that we have, which watching this season or watching this back again, watching season 1 again, just how many actors that have flourished into A-list actors that were just peppered throughout season 1 is insane. And so comment in the comment section if I leave anything out too as well. I try to catch as many as I could. If I missed anyone, please let me know in the comment section. So we have Fabia, who is a part of Fabia Cosmetics, played by Gina Gershon. We have Sophia Reyes, which is a love interest for Daniel, played by Salma Hayek. We have Leah Feldman, which is an immigration lawyer, played by Debbie Mazar. We have Constance Grady, who's an immigration caseworker, played by Octavia Spencer. We have Dr. Farkas, who is Betty's dentist, played by Jesse Tyler Ferguson. And then we have Grace Chen, who is a lawyer, played by Lucy Liu. Nick Pepper, one of Alexis Mead's assistant, played by Max Greenfield. We have Quincy Combs, the gossip reporter, played by Leslie Jordan. Catherine McPhee playing as herself. Rodrigo Veloso, who works for Mode magazine in Brazil, played by Christian de la Fuente. Jordan Dunn, Alexis's ex, played by Rebecca Gayhart. We have a convict named Yoga, played by Lorraine Toussaint. And then we have the dental assistant, Diane, dental assistant to Dr. Farkas, Betty's dentist, played by Kristen Chenoweth. Mirta Suarez, Ignacio's sister, played by Rita Moreno. We have cousin Clara, played by Justina Machado. Please forgive me if I pronounced that incorrectly, but I believe it's Justina Machado. And we have a douche guy played by Jerry O'Connell. And he's only in there for a hot second, but that concludes the list of guest stars that I have seen throughout the season 1. And like I said earlier, if you see someone else that I forgot to mention, please comment in the comment section. Which also, if you like this, please like and subscribe to this channel, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's get into season 1. So I'm gonna actually start off just with the opening scene of Ugly Betty because I think it kind of just lays the foundation for the rest of the series or sets it up. So let's get started. So we have this frumpy-haired lady just sitting there, kind of anxiously waiting for something. We don't know exactly what it is yet, but she's sitting there, and we see in the background a sign that says Mead Publications. So we have this frumpy-haired lady, and then all of a sudden this beautiful lady comes and sits next to her, and she's wearing this poncho. The frumpy-haired lady just looks at her poncho and is like, "I really like your poncho. My dad got me one from Guadalajara." And the lady just kind of is just like, "Yeah, okay." So this gentleman comes out and yells out, "Betty Suarez." And she's like, "That's me, the frumpy-haired lady." So that's when we know this is our main character, Betty Suarez. This is Ugly Betty, Betty Suarez. So she's like, "I have my resume with me." And the guy looks at her, gives her an up and down look, and it's just like, "All the positions are filled." And just turns around and walks off. So Betty, sensing she's not going to get an interview, chases this man down and says, "I just love Mead Publications. I love all the magazines. They've inspired me to be a writer, da-da-da-da." And the man is just like not having it. And from afar, you see this older gentleman kind of looking at this interaction between Betty and this gentleman that she's chasing down. But then we cut back to Betty chasing the man down. And the man is just like, "No thanks," and kind of closes the door in her face. So we cut to Betty going home, speaking with her family. And this is where we meet the Suarez family. We meet Ignacio, Hilda, and Justin. And Poppy or Ignacio asks Betty how her interview went. And she's like, "I think I did really well." And Hilda, knowing her sister's like, "You didn't get it." And Betty says, "Well, they said all the positions were filled." And Hilda is kind of just like giving her a hard time, and Ignacio kind of has to interfere. But in the meantime, Justin is in the background watching fashion TV. And this is where we find out that the former editor-in-chief of Mode magazine, Faye Summers, has just passed away in a car crash, and Daniel Mead has taken the position. Daniel Mead, like I mentioned, is the son of Bradford Mead, who Bradford Mead also owns Mead Publications. So he essentially is the Nepo baby who got this position, whereas anyone in the fashion industry basically thought that Wilhelmina Slater, who is the creative director for Mode magazine, should have gotten that position. But Daniel got the position. So that's what we have. And Daniel actually has a reputation for being a bit of a playboy and doesn't take life seriously. So we cut to Betty gets a phone call and says, they said, "Excuse me," Justin answers the phone, I believe. Betty answers it. It says for Betty. Betty gets it and finds out that she actually got the job for the assistant to the editor-in-chief for Mode Magazine. Woo, woo! So yay! So here we go. We're starting it off. Justin asks Betty exactly what she's going to wear. And Betty, thinking back, is like, I got it. So if we remember what I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video, that she saw the beautiful lady with the poncho and she mentioned her Guadalajara poncho. Yes, you guessed it. That is exactly what she wears on the first day to her job at a fashion magazine. It literally is this vibrant non-designer poncho that says Guadalajara on it, and she just comes in strutting like she is everything, confident, and that's how you should be. But so she comes in, and this is where we meet Amanda. Amanda is the first face that she sees at Mode Magazine. As I mentioned, Amanda is the receptionist, and she's like, "Are you the before picture?" And Betty's like, "What?" She's like, "Are you the before picture for our before and after shoot?" And Betty's like, "No, I'm the assistant." And Amanda's like, "Okay." So Amanda leads her to the meeting where Daniel actually is at the moment. Daniel is hosting a meeting, kind of introducing himself. And then while Daniel's having this meeting, he sees Betty in the corner of her eye and kind of makes some comments, not so nice comments pertaining to Betty, that makes some slips that come out. And then Wilhelmina, Slater, and Mark end up coming and crashing the meeting, comes in a little late, kind of throws some shade towards Daniel. And as you can tell, Wilhelmina's a little bitter that she didn't get to the editor-in-chief position that she probably should have gotten, and you can see some tension a little bit between Wilhelmina and Daniel. And throughout the whole entire series, it's off rip, Wilhelmina is just plotting and scheming to become the editor-in-chief of Mode Magazine at all costs. She is just doing all types of things, and she has Mark in there trying to help her do that as well. Daniel finds out that, Betty is his new assistant, and he thought he was going to have a pretty lady being his assistant, but that does not actually happen. So with that being said, Daniel tries to get Betty to quit and tortures this poor girl throughout the whole entire episode and just wants her to quit. But Betty, being Betty, just resilient, just sticks it out and does anything that she can do because she really wants this job. So as mentioned before, Daniel is trying to get Betty to quit at all costs. And at one point, Betty just breaks and she quits. He plays like a mean joke on her and just embarrasses her, and she just quits. And so, but before that, why Betty reaches her breaking point. So as I mentioned earlier, when I mentioned the characters, Christina McKinney, who is the seamstress for Vogue, her and Betty meet in the cafeteria on Betty's first day. She doesn't really have anywhere to sit, kind of like, in elementary school or high school, you're like walking down to like, who am I gonna sit with? Got your little tray looking sad. And Christina sees her and is like, hey, you're Betty, right? Come sit with me and my crew. So they become friends and they form a friendship. So when Betty is talking to Christina at one point, she mentions how Daniel's being really mean to her. So Christina says, I don't know if you've heard yet, but the reason why you were hired to be Daniel's assistant was so he wouldn't be tempted to sleep with his assistants. So, yikes. Kind of hurts Betty's feelings, and she's like, oh, it's okay. And so just walks off and goes to the meeting with Daniel. However, or to go meet up with Daniel, or she goes somewhere. But she ends up leaving behind this project she had been working on. And it was for Fabia Cosmetics. Because as I mentioned earlier, Fabia Cosmetics is a big line for Mode Magazine. And they get a lot of ad revenue from them. So Betty was working on a project for a good ad campaign to go into Mode Magazine. So the moment where Betty actually just breaks and quits, inadvertently, I believe Christina actually shows, or somehow I don't think they really show in the first episode how Daniel gets this project, but sees the project and is like, this is really good. Because we do find out that Daniel has a heart and felt really bad when Betty quit and felt horrible for treating her that way. So he goes by, stops by Betty's house and is like, hey, I'm sorry. Also saw your project. It's pretty good. You should come back. And she's like, I'll have to think about it. So she ends up coming back to Mode and worked for Daniel. And essentially her project basically saves Daniel's tail, which is great. Yay. But Betty lets him take the credit for it because people try to kind of shortchange Daniel. A little bit of background with that too is Bradford is constantly comparing Daniel to his older brother, Alex Mead, who Alex Mead actually died 2 years ago, I believe, in an accident, a ski accident, I want to say. So Daniel is constantly being compared to him, and Daniel's kind of the screw up where Alex was the golden boy. And so Bradford is always expecting Daniel to mess up. So when Betty's project for Five Big Cosmetics comes into play or saves the day, Bradford gives Daniel his kudos because Betty allows Daniel to take credit for it, which is nice. And this is exactly where Betty and Daniel actually form a bond, a type of friendship throughout the season, which is beautiful. And so in the midst of all this, we have Wilhelmina, as I mentioned, who is plotting and planning to be the creative director with Mark, her assistant. She also has been talking to this mysterious woman that we don't know who it is. We are assuming it's Faye Summers, but we're not sure who this person is. But she is also plotting with this lady to take over the magazine as well. So that's pretty much the first episode in a nutshell. So from this point on, I'll just be talking about the first season. So throughout the series, we have this mysterious woman that I talked about, ends up calling Daniel, mentions to Daniel, she doesn't introduce herself, of course. She tells Daniel that his father has secrets. Bradford has secrets. She doesn't mention what secrets they are, but Daniel wants to find out. So Bradford, they cut to Bradford talking to, and almost like it's like a hitman. I'm not really sure who he is, but kind of this guy who's up to no good, and he's talking to him. And the guy has been snooping around Faye's place. She had an estate sale. He was snooping around, I guess, probably to see if there is anything indicating if Faye's car accident was actually an accident or was it a murder, and hopefully it does not implicate Bradford. There's nothing lying around to implicate Bradford Mead. And why is that? Is because we find out Bradford Mead had an affair with Faye Summers, the editor-in-chief, the former editor-in-chief of Mode magazine. We find out that Bradford had an affair with her, and the only person who knew that had the affair was Claire Mead, Bradford's wife. And so then Daniel, cutting to Daniel's trying to go to his mother, trying to find out what secrets his father may have had. And Claire Mead is also in rehab at this moment. So Daniel had to pull her out of rehab and takes her to a restaurant, and they're talking about it. So he's like, what secrets did Dad have? And Claire's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And Claire's like, if you give me a sip of that wine, I'll tell you all the secrets that I know. And of course, Daniel gives her the wine. She takes a big swig, drinks the whole thing, and mentions that he had an affair with Faye Summers for 20 years. So that's how Daniel finds out about the affair. So there is that. And then we see that Betty meets Henry. Betty ends up meeting Henry, the accountant that I mentioned earlier, one of her love interests at Mode magazine, meets her. They kind of hit it off. They're flirting a little bit. They seem to kind of just click, and Henry is adorbs. He's just he's so dorky, but he's like the hot dork. He's like really buff for like no reason, but super hot, very cute. He's kind of into Betty. She's getting a little crush. And remember, Betty has a boyfriend, Walter. But as Betty has gotten this job, her and Walter seem to they're kind of growing apart a little bit because Betty's priorities are shifting. She's in Manhattan living the good life, where Walter's still in Queens doing his tech job. So there's that. So she ends up breaking up with Walter at some point. So she starts to pursue her crush with Henry. We also find out that Ignacio did not come into America legally. So Betty one day is making phone calls trying to get his medication, and then she ends up speaking to his HMO. They say that his social security number is actually to someone else and he should be 100 and something years old. And this is where Ignacio has to tell them basically that I didn't come to this country legally, and explains exactly why he met their mother, which, by the way, their mother actually passed away a while ago. Betty and Hilda's mother passed away a while ago. I don't know if they ever say how she passed away, but she did pass away. She's no longer there. And so he met their mother in Mexico. She was in an abusive relationship and they ran off together. He may or may not have murdered the man who was abusing their mother. He thinks he did, but they fled and they ended up moving to America, where that's how they raised Betty and Hilda. So he explains that story to them. So that's one of the major plot lines. Ignacio not being in the States legally. Okay. So Daniel meets Sophia, and Sophia, like I mentioned earlier, is played by Sophia Reyes, is played by Salma Hayek, and he just goes crazy for her. They have an encounter. He just goes insane for her, and it's Salma Hayek. I mean, it's enough said. So she kind of plays hard to get with him. He likes to chase. They end up getting together, but she actually ends up playing him, embarrassingly enough, on national television. Heartbreak, so sad. It's kind of karma, but Daniel mentions, he's like, yeah, but I didn't do it on national television when I broke up with all these women. Touche. So we switch to going to Fashion Week. Fashion Week ends up happening. Wilhelmina makes a deal with Christina. Christina, the seamstress for Mode Magazine. Christina is also a designer as well. She works on her own clothing line. So Wilhelmina says, hey, if you drop off this package for me, I will put your clothing line in Fashion Week. And Christina, knowing she's probably about to make a deal with the devil, does it begrudgingly, but she takes the package, drops it off at the post office. So if you remember the mysterious woman that I mentioned earlier that Wilhelmina is speaking to, she makes her reveal in this episode. So we find out that the mysterious woman is dun, 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 Alex Mead, known as Alexis Mead. So when I mentioned earlier that Alex was in a car crash 2 years ago, apparently he was transitioning. He became a woman and had the surgery during that time and was recovering. And apparently he had told Bradford that he wanted to transition, and Bradford said, if you do that, you will be dead to me. And so I guess essentially he died off. But they make their big reveal during Fashion Week, during Christina's fashion show, because actually Alexis was a model in the fashion show, and Christina's fashion show. So she ends up making a big to-do that I'm Alex, and of course that is fashion news for the ages for them to write about. And then Bradford gets arrested right after Alexis makes the big reveal and is arrested for the murder of Faye Summers. And this is where Christina realizes that is the package that she delivered or dropped off in the mail was actually evidence to indicate Bradford had something to do with Faye Summers' car crash. So after Bradford is arrested, Claire Mead essentially is acting a little weird. She's really happy. And then Daniel's like, wait, what? Why are you so happy? And Claire's like, listen, I thought I lost a child, but I didn't lose a child. I don't care that she is a she now or he's a she now. I don't care. I have my child back. Understandably so. I get it. So Claire ends up also turning herself in a little bit later, that she was the one who actually killed Faye Summers. I'm not exactly sure why, but she turns herself in as saying that she is the one who actually killed Faye Summers and gets Bradford out of jail. Alexis is trying to take over Mode Magazine because essentially she was to be the one, since she is the eldest, she was to be the one to actually take over Mode Magazine. But since at the time we thought that she had passed away, Daniel ended up taking that position. However, Alexis is trying to get it back because, as I mentioned before, she was the mysterious woman that Wilhelmina was plotting and planning, trying to become editor-in-chief with, and that is why, because she was going to take over that position once Alexis came into power. But not so fast. It doesn't really work out. Alexis has a change of heart when it comes to Daniel because throughout she realizes throughout the season, she realizes that Daniel is not her father. She thought that Daniel would react the same way towards her transition that Bradford did, and he does not. And so Alexis kind of has a change of heart and doesn't really want to screw over her brother like that. So that ultimately ends up screwing over Wilhelmina. So now, of course, Wilhelmina is trying to find another way to get to become that editor-in-chief of Mode Magazine. So bringing it back to Henry and Betty, Henry's girlfriend ends up coming to town. And so this is where Betty and Henry were going to try to pursue a relationship because Henry at the time thought that she was still with Walter, but she ended up breaking up with Walter, as I mentioned before. So Henry went back home to Tucson and met up with his ex-girlfriend, and they kind of had rekindled some feelings towards one another, and they ended up getting back together, which crushes Betty a little bit, but hey, it is what it is. Betty, unbeknownst to her, actually ends up becoming friends with Henry's girlfriend because she meets Henry's girlfriend in the cafeteria one day when she's visiting Henry. Charlie is her name, Henry's girlfriend. They end up becoming friends, and then later on in one of the episodes, she finds out that this is actually Henry's girlfriend. And Charlie, being none the wiser, doesn't know what kind of history him and Betty have had. They have been flirting. They're going to try to pursue a relationship, and she doesn't know. So Charlie ends up inviting Betty to one of her little parties, jewelry parties that she had, and she brings Dr. Farkas, her dentist, to that party, and she was going to try to pursue a relationship with Dr. Farkas because she felt like Dr. Farkas did liked Betty, and so she was going to try to pursue that relationship but that didn't really work out. But she does bring Dr. Farkas to the party that Charlie invited Betty to. And also just keep that little nugget in your mind. Remember that. Mark's mother ends up coming to town, and Mark has always told his mother in the past that Amanda and him were boyfriend and girlfriend. Mark's mother does not know that he's gay. So Amanda has always been playing his girlfriend. So Mark had told his mother that Amanda cheated on Mark a while back. So of course, him and Amanda cannot be in this fake relationship that they're in. So Mark asks Betty, or somehow makes Betty become his fake girlfriend. So they end up coming to him and his mother, Mark and his mother end up going to dinner at Betty's house. And while they're there, Mark's mother is just not making nice comments, not to their face, but tells Mark not so nice things about them. And Mark is like, you don't get to talk about them like that. And at one point, Mark's mother says that Justin is swishy. And Mark was like, swishy? Why don't you look at your own swishy son? And this is where Mark is about to come out and tell his mother that he is gay. And his mother is just like, you're not swishy, you're just confused. And Mark is like, absolutely not. I am who you think that I am. And unfortunately, at this point, this is where Mark's mother disowns him, and you don't really see her in the series anymore, I don't believe. So unfortunately, that's what happened. Mark comes out to his mother, and his mother disowns him. So going back to Daniel, so if you can imagine, Daniel, actually, sorry, I just want to talk about one more point about Mark. This is where you kind of see the niceness of Mark come out, because up until this point, Mark has not been so nice. Him and Amanda have a really good rapport with one another, and you'll see that throughout the series, that they are so witty, so funny. Their dialogue is so hilarious, and they're so good together. But this is where you kind of see that Mark is not as bad as we may think that he is, because he does stick up for the Suarez family to his mother when she makes some not so nice comments about them, because he was just like, you cannot talk about them like that. They have done a nice thing for me, so you don't get to talk to them like that. So that was a nice moment, some character growth for Mark. But back to Daniel. So if you can imagine, Daniel has been through it. I mean, he's in a position where he is not well equipped to be in this fashion magazine that he really wasn't supposed to be editor-in-chief of, but by default, since Alex was dead, his older brother. But then also finding out that his brother is not dead, but not only is he not dead, he is now a woman, Alexis. So he's dealing with that. His mother and father somewhat just got arrested for the death of Faye Summers. Just got arrested for the death of Faye Summers. He was humiliated on national television by a woman that he genuinely loved. So Daniel is just going through it. And to the point where he's going out, he's kind of going back to his old partying ways, because as he got this position, he did start to shed that Playboy facade. So he started to go back to his Playboy ways. He's going out every night, partying hard, going home with women every night, to the point where Betty is just like, you almost got yourself in a situation, which, watch the show for that. You almost got yourself in a situation. I need you to get it together. You need to talk to someone. So he ends up talking to a therapist. That therapist apparently also had problems going out with women all the time too as well, and says, hey, you know how I got over it is these. And it's like this pill bottle. So unfortunately, Daniel trades one addiction in for another. Instead of going home with women every night, now he's taking pills every night. So now he develops this addiction. We move on to Alexis. So as Alexis now is a woman, I believe, I can't remember exactly who he is, but he works for Mode Brazil. He is fine, whoever he is, but Rodrigo, so cute. He ends up kind of flirting with Alexis, and Alexis is like, okay, and Wilhelmina's like, hey girl, like, he's cute, like, you should look into that. And she's just like, I don't know, because this is her first time being with a man now that she's a woman. And so Rodrigo is just saying all the right things to her. She falls for him. Rodrigo says, hey, let's run off together. Let's go back to Brazil together, because he has to go back home to Brazil and work for the magazine there. And she's just like giddy with excitement because she really likes him. She tells her mom that she likes him, and she wants to go to Brazil with Rodrigo. But then they're together. She tells Rodrigo that she's going to go with him, and he says, okay. And I think he gets a phone call. I believe he gets a phone call, or Rodrigo makes a phone call. I can't remember. But somehow Alexis picks up the phone, and we find out that Rodrigo had been scheming with Bradford to get rid of Alexis, and Bradford wanted Rodrigo to take Alexis back to Brazil, and if he was successful in doing that, Bradford would have promoted Rodrigo to I believe, editor-in-chief of Mode magazine in Brazil. And of course, Alexis is just devastated, which, I mean, who wouldn't be? That's just really cruel. And then your own father does something like that to you. Like, that's just, ugh. So, yeah. So, needless to say, Alexis orders a hit on Bradford because she is just over him at this point. So she orders a hit with Bradford. So we're just waiting for that to play out. But in the meantime, Wilhelmina, as I mentioned before, she's plotting and scheming, trying to be editor-in-chief because the plan that she hatched up with Alexis didn't work out, since Alexis is kind of feeling sympathy towards Daniel at this point. And so she starts hitting on Bradford. So she is trying to hone in on Bradford, in hopes of she will become the creative director of Mode magazine. And so they end up actually having a relationship, but Bradford tells her, I will never divorce Claire. Same thing I told Faye. I'll never divorce Claire. So, of course, Wilhelmina loves a challenge. So that's what she tries to do. She has Mark beat her up in a stairwell and makes it seem like she went and visited Claire, and Claire actually jumped her or had someone jump her. I can't remember exactly, but basically hit her. And so Bradford at some point ends up divorcing Claire. So that is one way that Wilhelmina can become editor-in-chief of Mode magazine. So it hasn't happened, but we're thinking that's what the direction we're going to go into. Back to Charlie and Henry and Betty, the love triangle. Charlie finds out that Betty and Henry end up having a history together, and Charlie is not liking those two and how close they're getting. So I believe Charlie and Henry end up breaking up long thereafter, after Charlie has a conversation with Henry about that. I believe they end up breaking up, and so that happens. So Santos and Hilda are actually sneaking around. Santos, I mentioned, is just Hilda's ex and Justin's father. They end up kind of getting back together. There was a tension between these two because when Hilda got pregnant at 16, Santos kind of tucked tail and ran and didn't stick around or help her. Didn't help her with Justin. So there are some ill feelings for there. And of course, Ignacio does not like Santos. There's some tension there, but they end up getting back together, and they're sneaking around, but then Santos ends up proposing to Hilda. So they are engaged, and so that was sweet. So they end up getting back together. Meanwhile, Ignacio, as I mentioned earlier, he is not a legal U.S. citizen, so he has to go back to Mexico to get his visa. So the family goes to Mexico. This is where we're actually going to meet. It seems as though they have never actually been to Mexico, it seems, as a family. So they meet Ignacio's family. This is where Rita Moreno and Justina Machado, I apologize if I pronounced this name wrong. This is where they make an appearance, and because this is Ignacio's family. So Betty's trying to find more about her mother, and they do talk about that in a lot of the episode of this particular episode when they go to Mexico. But while they're in Mexico, Betty is seeing like visions of Henry everywhere, and I can't remember if they're actually real, or I'm assuming they are just mirages of Henry. But yeah, she's seeing Henry, and this is where like a sign for her that she has to tell Henry how she feels about him. So they're gonna go back home, but Ignacio actually tells Betty that he can't go back home because he went to the consulate and it actually didn't work out for him to get his visa in Mexico, so he has to end up staying back home. Ignacio stays back, and Betty's like, well, we're all gonna stay back, and Ignacio's like, no, you got a lot going for you right now. I will be fine. You all go back to New York. And so they end up going back to New York. Betty wants to confess, like I said, her love to Henry. However, Charlie ends up coming back, and Charlie is pregnant. So what we're assuming is, Henry's child, and Henry is just kind of like, I'm going to end up going back to Tucson with Charlie and, help her, raise this baby together. We're going to try to work it out. But then Betty's at the dentist, and she's at the dentist office getting a cleaning from her dental assistant Diane, which is played by Kristen Chenoweth, as I mentioned earlier. And she's mentioning, this whole thing, and Diane mentions that Dr. Fargus had been dating someone named Charlie. And Betty's like, wait a minute, Charlie, I took Dr. Fargus to Charlie's party way back when. And so she's like, yeah, Diane's like, yeah, she made us little bracelets and things like that. And remember, Charlie had invited Betty to her jewelry party thing, like the party she was like selling her jewelry. So we're deducing that Dr. Fargus and Charlie may have had something going on. So perhaps this baby may not be Henry's baby. Plot twist. So Betty is on her way to try to go back to Tucson, or try to go to Tucson to tell Henry all of these things. But before she does that, she's at home, about to leave, and there are cops at the door. And so while there are cops at the door, flashback a little bit, Santos goes to a convenience store. Justin is about to star in a play, and Santos wanted to get him something. And at this convenience store, the worker or the owner of the convenience store is actually in the middle of a holdup. Someone is robbing him actively, and he has a gun. The robber has a gun. He's getting robbed. The robber has a gun, and Santos is there. And so he ends up having Santos and the owner of the convenience store held hostage. And Santos tries to save everyone, save himself and the convenience store owner, and he ends up getting shot. So that's why the police officers are at the Suarez's house, because they're trying to find Hilda. Hilda's not there. Betty goes to the play where Justin is, and she's trying to tell Hilda exactly what happened. She does tell Hilda something. We don't know exactly what she told Hilda, but we don't know if Santos is alive or if he unfortunately got shot and didn't make it. We don't know. So we're kind of just left on that bit of a cliffhanger for that season. And we do know Hilda is just distraught over it. And I mean, she was acting, so we don't know what happened. And then we also find out Bradford ends up proposing to Wilhelmina. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but he does end up proposing to Wilhelmina after he divorces Claire. So he ends up proposing to Wilhelmina. So Wilhelmina and Bradford are engaged. So that is one way Wilhelmina will secure her spot as editor-in-chief, or will she? Editor-in-chief of Mode magazine. And with all of that, Claire attempts to escape prison. She ends up getting with yoga. As I mentioned, Lorraine Toussaint plays yoga. She ends up having a plan with yoga to escape jail. So I believe that we see them in the car being transported somewhere. So that is exactly where I believe their escape will start. But I'm assuming that I believe that goes into the second season. And then one other cliffhanger that we leave on is Alexis and Daniel. As I mentioned earlier, Daniel has developed a little bit of a pill habit. So Alexis can tell he's highly intoxicated. I think she thinks he might be on an overdose. And she says, I need to take you to the hospital. So she takes him goes to take him to the hospital. Excuse me. She orders her assistant, Nick, to order a car. Nick says some events going on, all the cars are booked, and she's like, okay, well, just get my car downstairs. She goes to get her car, in the car, Bradford's car. She's driving Daniel to the hospital, and Daniel mentions how she's going really, really fast, and she's like, I know, but I can't slow down. And then she realizes, she's like, I don't know why I can't slow down, but then she realizes that this is how I mentioned earlier, she ordered a hit on Bradford. The hitman must have cut the brakes to Bradford's car, and that's how he was going to die. But instead, Alexis and Daniel are actually in the car, and so they end up getting in a car wreck, and you see them, I don't know if they hit a tree, but they're like in an embankment, and they're both unconscious. So that is how season 1 ends up concluding. So we have So we have Ignacio back in Mexico. We don't know when he's coming home. We have Santos. We don't know if he is alive or not alive. We have Bradford and Wilhelmina being engaged. We have Alexis and Daniel. We don't know if they're alive or they're not alive. We have the saga with Betty, Henry, and Charlie going on. Just a lot. And that was all in the first season. It's good stuff. I just love Ugly Betty. Just have so many twists and turns. And you just love also, like I said, the chemistry of the family, the cast, like just great writing. The music is wonderful. The music score is great. Gives you all the feels, makes me happy. You have Betty, who is just trying to make it, this little girl from Queens, New York, trying to make it in this industry that she is a fish out of water, but she is killing the thing. Just love it. Just love to see it. I hope this inspires you to start watching Ugly Betty. There's 23 episodes in the first season, about 45 minutes long. Yeah, just great show. Just love it. So we'll be getting we'll be getting into the second season next season. I'm excited to talk about that. So if you're watching it with me, be sure to watch it and then come and check out my recap and reaction of season 2 of Ugly Betty. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please also leave a comment on here. This is my first recap video, so yay me. So there are going to be so many more videos, so many more series, so many more movies to talk about, but right now I'm doing Ugly Betty, and next week I will be into season 2. So come back next week to learn about season 2, and so I'll see you next week. Bye.